Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1967. We're going to be taking a look at Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the Holding Company, and this is the performance that started it all. It's going to be from the Monterey Pop Festival. So let's get Janis and the guys up on screen and see how they get on.
Just looking out at the rain. Sitting down by my window, just looking out at the rain. Some came along, honey, grabbed a hold of me, and it felt like a ball and chain. When I ran, it all stay on, hunt, tell me why does everything go wrong? I said, people, honey, oh, go wrong. I want to love you for so long. Oh yeah. Honey, it ain't fair. Honey, it ain't fair. What do? I said, honey, what you doing to me? No. That's all I could do. But I'm not, and I'm gonna tell you, baby, yeah! Sitting down by my window, just looking out at the rain. Down by my window, just looking out at the rain.
I'm just going to jump in here. The link to this is going to be in the description below so you guys can watch it the whole way through without me interrupting it. But recently on the channel I've been looking at some top vocalists and distinctive vocalists as well, and that is Janis Joplin, because her vocal sound, her delivery and her overall performance is so distinctive. She was the only one who could do this, and as soon as you hear her voice like the top vocalist, you know instantly who it is. And if you're wondering why we stayed on the audience for a while there, that was Cass Elliot, who was in the crowd looking dumbfounded, like probably all of the crowd there, because looking at Janis perform, especially for the time, she just went for it on stage, vocally, just putting everything into the performance so that she gave away so much emotion because she was really involved in what she was singing and she connected with the lyrics. And you could tell that with her performance, you'd never get the same thing twice from Janis because she sang with a feeling. So however she wanted to put it across at that particular time is exactly what you got. And just technically speaking about Janis's voice in this performance, we start out with quite a clean tone. She's not leaning into it at all. cool and applies that vibrato to that clean sound. And then she adds a little bit of that smoky quality to it as well, which just gives it a richer sound. And then when she totally opens the taps, that is the Janis Joplin sound. Just real grit on there, real emotion, and letting it all hang out, putting everything into every single vocal phrase. And it's a rare ability to have as a singer to connect to an audience at this kind of level, because there are 1,000,001 singers in the world, whereas the ones that can really connect with an audience are few and far between, and Janis was part of that club. And especially when we analyze what's going on here, I mentioned in other videos recently about auto-tune and how you lose the expression in the voice, and by no means does Janis have perfect pitch throughout this performance, but you can then start to understand how emotion and the connection is almost nothing to do with having perfect pitch, because it's something else in there. And that's what music's all about for me personally, that you can have a performance that means so much and can connect on such a deep level, but it's not perfect pitch all the time. And Janis was one of those performers that gave you everything on stage, and I can't think of any other performer that gives more than Janis did live. Just putting her heart on the line with her singing. And that's what Stevie Nicks said about Janis, that every time she gives you a piece of her heart, and that's really what it feels like. The other thing that we have with Janis's vocal is that dynamic change. It's very much like starting with a clean tone on your guitar and then just hitting that distortion pedal and taking that tone somewhere totally different. That's what we've got from Janis's vocal. And all I can liken it to is like just standing in a light breeze, and then a minute later you are in a hurricane, because it is so dramatic. And it's not only dynamically that we're changing, but emotionally as well. It's such a dramatic change across the board with Janis's live performances. But let's get back into the performance.
Some came along, 100 grabbed a hold of her, and it felt like a ball and chain. Well, all right, here it comes the last time now. And all say, oh, whoa, oh, honey, oh, this can't be. Well, on this can't be thing. I said, tell me, come on. Tell me why. Oh, tell me why. Oh, baby, tell me why love. Honey, why love is like. Well, it's like a ball and in a chain.
And there we have it. This kind of performance, you can't fake this. In some parts of the performance, she stutters, she can't get the words out fast enough because she's trying to tell the story, because she's so emotionally involved with the message of the song. And it's such a rare thing to have a singer who is so involved in the composition, in the message of the song that they're singing. And sometimes, like I said, you can't fake this. Sometimes you'll be watching a singer and they sing a song and it's all nice, but they're not emotionally involved in what they're singing. And this is why it's such a rare thing to see a performer like Janis, because I think nowadays, imagining this kind of performance on one of these modern day reality TV shows, they wouldn't get it because they'd say, oh, it wasn't perfect pitch-wise, and they wouldn't know what it's all about. Whereas when you look past that and look into the art of the performance and the art of music, this is what it can do. It can give you a buzz. It can make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up when you get connected with a singer who is feeling every single lyric of the song that they're singing. And that is Janis Joplin in a nutshell. You go on an emotional journey with her every time. And this really was the performance that got the ball rolling for Janis and the guys, because they had recorded their album Big Brother and the Holding Company in 1966, but they hadn't released it yet. So this was a great opportunity to release their album with this newfound publicity. And in 1968 is when Columbia Records took over their contract and re-released the album. They added a couple of tracks and put on the front featuring Janis Joplin, and the album got to number 60 in the charts, and their single Down on Me got to number 42. And in 1968 they released their next album called Cheap Thrills, and that was the last album that they'd do together. The interesting thing about this album is that everybody mistook it for a live album because John Simon, the producer, mixed in crowd noise, so it sounded like live performances, but it was recorded in a studio. All of the tracks were, apart from one, which was the cover of Ball and Chain from a different performance, not this one that we've just listened to, but that was live. And that album went to number 1 in the charts, and it stayed there for 8 non-consecutive weeks. And in 1969 is when Janis released I Got Dem Old Cosmic Blues Again Mama. What a title that is for an album. But this was now just by herself, and because she was now in control of things a lot more than she was previously, she got a brass and horn section involved with that album. It went gold within 2 months of being released, but it wasn't as successful as the previously released Cheap Thrills album. And that album that didn't do so well compared to the previous one has now gone platinum, and Cheap Thrills has gone 2 times platinum. And that brings us to Pearl, which was released after Janis's death. That went 4 times platinum and was a huge hit. It went to number 1 for 9 consecutive weeks. It also had the massive number 1, Me and Bobby McGee, the cover that Janis did of the Chris Christopherson track. And I'm sure everybody knows this story about Janis's unfortunate death in 1970. She did have a problem with drugs for a lot of her life and career, and she went through spells of getting off the drugs but then getting back on them again, and unfortunately heroin was one of those, and that is just one hell of a drug to try and get off. And Janis really struggled with that addiction and unfortunately died of an overdose in 1970. So this understandably was a huge shock to everybody, considering that Janis was only 27 years of age when she died, and also considering that she'd only been releasing albums since 1967, and then she died in 1970. So right at the peak of her career and her publicity in the public eye, unfortunately she passed away. And also Jimi Hendrix passed away at the same age, 27, just 16 days earlier than Janis. So unfortunately another example of an artist who was cut down in their prime, and we never got to see where she would take her music as a solo artist, and she just couldn't get away from that addiction to heroin, unfortunately, and it took her life. But fortunately, we have these videos that we can refer back to and the recordings, and we can still get to appreciate Janis Joplin in 2019, and the emotion still comes through these videos because of the nature of her performances. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!